All right. Welcome back again. So today is the day of endless Dhammas, going on all day, which is great. So we'll see what happens as we go along. So the topic for the talk tonight is the confounding problem of impermanence. It is not my suggestion. It was suggested by someone here at the BF. Is that right, Eiling? So I have no idea who suggested it, but it's actually a very good topic. And I thought, actually, this is the kind of thing I wanted to talk about anyway. And I thought someone had read my mind or something. I thought, wow, they're doing really well at the BF. They are reading your minds, which is really kind of cool. So it's actually a very good topic, because it is one of those very interesting things in life, that the idea of impermanence, on the one hand, it seems so obvious. And on the other hand, actually, it is not really obvious at all. And one of the things that is very obvious when you start reading the suttas of the Buddha is that it talks about impermanence in so many places and in so many different ways. Such a fundamental understanding, such a fundamental outlook. And if you want to be wise about how the world works, that is where we have to start out. And the Buddha, he says things like in the suttas, he says everything that is dear and beloved to you must become otherwise, must become separated from you. And this is the idea of impermanence right there. There's nothing in the world we can really hold on to ultimately. He talks about sickness, old age and death. It's also all about impermanence, how things is always changing. And no wonder we get a bad name in Buddhism. Everything is separated from you. Sickness, old age and death. It's really kind of super duper, not exactly optimistic, but of course it is optimistic. That's the whole point. We need to understand the reality before we can make some good decisions in life. Idea of death, it's really about impermanence ultimately, because it's about letting go of everything. It's about your life changing, moving into the unknown, into this big uncertainty. And on the path, having to let go of everything as you do that. So it's like impermanence big time when we're going to die here. And you read the suttas and you realize that this is what it is about all the time. Often it is in a very simple way like this. The kind of ordinary ideas, the way we think about the world. At other times it's more profound. It's about what we experience through meditation. The Buddha says, observe your 5 khandhas, observe your experience. And what you will see in your experience is exactly that. Things arising, things passing away, nothing being solid, nothing being constant. This is the nature of kind of how the world, what the world is like, what our world of experience is like. And he talks about one of the things that I always felt very interesting. He talks about the kind of the micro world of every individual, every single person. But sometimes he stands back and he looks at the world overall, like the cosmos, or kind of almost like the universe. One of the suttas that I always found very interesting, very kind of awesome, sadhu, as Ajahn translates sadhu as awesome. I don't mean that kind of awesome, but really this extraordinary sutta, which was kind of baffling for me, where the Buddha says there will come a time in the future where the sun expands. Actually talks about like 7 stages of the sun. It's a bit unclear whether it's 7 suns or 7 stages of I understand there are 7 stages of the same sun. And it says the sun gets warmer and warmer and warmer, and as the sun gets warmer in this way, all the life on the earth will start to die. The plants will die, all the animals will die, until there's nothing left of life on this planet. And then the water will start to evaporate. There will be less and less water on this planet. It will go down and down and down until all the water is gone. And then the sun will continue expanding until eventually the earth is consumed by the sun. And the whole thing burns up. This is in the suttas, and it's kind of extraordinary because, of course, in modern cosmology, we know that's exactly what the future of the planet is like. If we go down a few billion years down the track, that's exactly what's going to happen. And it's kind of in the suttas. How is that possible? It's kind of weird, isn't it? It's kind of really strange that the kind of this very real to life cosmological ideas are found in scriptures that are 2,500 years old. It's really, really weird. But I just say that because the Buddha talks about large scale and small scale, and some of the things the Buddha says are really absolutely amazing. And I actually wrote there was a thing I wrote about that once, and it was published on the internet in a few places. But it's a very extraordinary thing. And I thought I'd just bring that into this idea because the Buddha has such a broad mind. It's extraordinary what you can see if you have this scope of mind that the Buddha had. But one of the most powerful ways that the Buddha talks about impermanence is towards the very end of his life. At the very end of his life, this is all talked about in the Mahaparinibbana Sutta, the great sutta on the Buddha's passing away. I'm sure you know that sutta. It's a very famous sutta. It's about the Buddha. He starts out in Rajagaha, the capital of the Magadhan. At that time, a kingdom. Later on, the empire of Ashoka, the greatest empire that India has ever seen. The Buddha starts out in Rajagaha, and he knows that now he's coming to the end of his life. And he's walking from Rajagaha. He's now 80 years old and still walking from Rajagaha all the way to where he's going to pass away, Kushinara. It's about, I don't know, have you been to India? You been to India? Yeah? How many? Yeah, a few of you have been to India. It's a long way, right? Even now you go by bus. It's probably faster to walk anyway than going by bus in India sometimes. But it's it's a long way, even by bus. And the Buddha walked that distance when he was 80 years old. It's incredible. But he knows that he's coming to the end of his life. And this is one of the things that makes the Mahaparinibbana Sutta so fascinating. Because now the Buddha is passing on all the information that is necessary for the Sangha, for the lay people, for the monastics, to carry on Buddhism after he passes away. So you can imagine that instructions in the Mahaparinibbana Sutta are going to be especially interesting because of that. He's going to summarize his teachings. He's going to tell the Sangha how to cope after he passes away. What are the significant issues to remember? And this is one of the reasons why I personally find the Mahaparinibbana Sutta one of the most interesting suttas in all the Nikayas. And I did, this is quite remarkable, we always do sutta readings in Perth, also at the Dhammaloka Center. And I did a sutta reading on the Mahaparinibbana Sutta, which went over how many sessions? 20 sessions or something. Each one 1 hour long, so you can, if you can get the idea. So if you're really, really keen, listen to that one. But you have to be really, really keen because it's in minute detail. So, but very fascinating. And this is where he says, the Dhamma that I have taught you can be summarized in the 37 Bodhipakya Dhammas, the 37 aids to awakening. This is where he tells the Sangha that there is no inner and outer. There is no inner core and outer disciples. Everyone has been taught all the teachings. There is no secret teaching in my the way I teach. And then coming closer and closer to the end of his life is giving all of these hints on how they're supposed to live and survive after he passes away. Take the Dhamma as your teacher, now they teach all of these kind of things. And at the very end, the very last words of the Buddha, imagine the situation. The Buddha is lying down between the twin sal trees. The sal trees are these large trees in India, and everyone knows this come to the very end. And the Buddha is almost on the way out, and he says to all the monks, "What is any last words, any last questions that you have? Now is the chance to ask. If you don't ask now, it's going to be too late." No one has a question. And then everyone knows this is the end. And then the last words of the Buddha are, "Vaya Dhamma Sankara Appamadena Sampadeta." Vaya Dhamma Sankara means all phenomena, sankharas are all phenomena in this case, have the nature to vanish. This is like a statement of impermanence. Nothing in the world is stable. Everything will eventually vanish. This is the last word of the Buddha. And then he says, and that is like the doctrine in a sense. It summarizes the doctrine of the Dhamma over all that time. And then he says, "Appamadena sampadeta." Be successful through heedfulness. By being diligent, by being careful in your practice, that is how you will succeed. So, in a sense, the idea of impermanence, that everything in the world must change, nothing is stable, it summarizes the entire teaching of the Buddha. And if you remember that, then you practice based on that, Appamadena sampadeta, then you will succeed on that basis. So it's extraordinarily powerful, right? It is the very foundation. If we think about impermanence in the right way, the way the Buddha is talking about here, maybe it's all we need. Yeah, we've just been talking about dependent origination all day. Maybe that was a waste of time. I could just tell you everything is impermanent. 𝑒𝑣𝒏𝒂𝒏𝒈, goodbye. See you next time. But yeah, sometimes it's necessary to talk about all of these things. But one of the weird things that I have found in my monastic life, I've been a monk now for, I don't know, how long is it? 26, 27 years, something like that. Still just a baby compared to people like Ajahn Brahm, but never mind. And so one of the strange things, the longer I'm a monk, the less interested I actually am in all of these fancy teachings. And the more I'm just interested in the simple things. How can I be more compassionate? How can I be more kind? And this idea of vaya dhamma sankhara reminds you of all of those basic things. Yeah, the world, everything is impermanent. Everything is so unstable. So this is found throughout the suttas. It is the foundation of so much. Why is it that the Buddha emphasizes this so much? What is the point? Yeah, the confounding problem of impermanence. I like that title. You've got to write it down somewhere. Why does the Buddha say this? It's kind of confounding. What's going on here? And of course, the reason why, because in a sense it seems so obvious. Yeah, if you look at our lives, everything is changing. Every time I come to Singapore, there's some new buildings coming up. There's something kind of moving around. Yeah. I used to live in Singapore back in the 1990, that's over 30 years ago, and it looks very different now from what it did 30 years ago, that's for sure. And so things are changing. Now, relationships are always changing. Some people are dead. Some new people come in. Yeah, it's a good thing that some new people come in, otherwise it would be very empty here after a while, so we're glad about that. And our relationships, some break up, some come back again. And this is it. We know these things. Yeah, you can see your family members, the older generations passing away. I remember my grandparents passing away, and now it's my parents' turn to gradually pass away. Yeah, and then the next generation come up. And you can almost see the cycle of samsara. Yeah, as you see it moving from generation to generation in this way. It's really fascinating. Yeah. It's always in our face. Every time I look myself in the mirror, I think, jeepers, is that what I look like now? That's kind of, but actually I don't think that. Actually, as a monk, it's really not. It's okay to get older as a monk. Yeah, it doesn't really matter. In fact, it's a very good reminder of impermanence. Yeah, when you look yourself in the mirror, I kind of shaved my head fairly recently. But if my hair was a little bit longer, you would see, wow, there's all grey hair everywhere. Yeah, the 𝑑𝒓𝒐𝒏𝒄𝒆, the sign of the devas. So in a sense, it is always in our face. It's kind of obvious that everything is impermanent. So why does the Buddha make so much of it? Well, on the one hand, it is obvious. But on the other hand, we don't really see it. Yeah? On the other hand, we are in denial about the reality of impermanence. How do we know that? You know that because if someone who is close to you dies, how do you feel? Usually you feel bad, yeah, especially if you have a very close relationship to them. You may grieve, you may be sad. Some people never get over it, yeah, and they die soon after their husband or wife die. They die too because they can't get over the fact that their husband or wife died. So we get it on the one hand, we see it, but we see it in a very shallow way. We don't really grasp it fully. If we grasp fully the idea of impermanence, then when someone in our family died, when someone started a war somewhere, if there is COVID coming around, yeah, another pandemic probably just around the corner, yeah, we don't have no idea what's going to happen next. Climate change, all of these things that are happening around the world, we would not be surprised. We would just say, oh yeah, I expected that. Expect the unexpected, right? The unexpected is supposed to happen. One of the kind of little catchphrase I've been using recently, expect the unexpected. That is really the right way of thinking about the world. And you may think, that's nonsense. How can you expect the unexpected? By definition, you cannot expect the unexpected, right? That's crazy. It's kind of oxymoron. It has a black, white. What do you mean black, white? But of course, the point is that you cannot expect specific unexpected events. But you can have a general idea that unexpected things will happen. So when they happen, you will say, oh yeah, I kind of expected that. Yeah, that is kind of the right way of thinking about things. So why is it that even though we can see impermanence all the way around us, why is it that we don't see it fully here? What is the reason why it is such a shallow appreciation of this very profound problem? And the answer is, or one way of thinking about it, is this beautiful teaching the Buddha had about what he called the vipallasa. And the vipallasa basically means like a distortion, like a perversion. Yeah, it's like the mind is distorted, doesn't see straight. And these vipallasas it's only talked about in one particular sutta and expanded on in the commentary quite a lot. But these vipallasas are of three kinds. There's the vipallasa of view, there's the vipallasa of thought, and there's the vipallasa of perception. And these vipallasas are in different areas. One is that you see a self where there is no self. That's kind of the fundamental one in many ways. The other one is that we see permanence where in fact there is impermanence. We see happiness where there is suffering. We see beauty when in fact it isn't all that beautiful. I often think about the body, and often we think about the body, the body is beautiful. You have to do that, otherwise you wouldn't be in a relationship or anything like that, right? But the body is, what is the body really? It really depends on how you look at it. If you peel off the skin, it's not the same, right? It takes away some of the attraction. It really depends on the angle you take on this body, whether it's beautiful or not. But one of the main things of the vipallasas is seeing permanence where there's impermanence. It starts off with a view. We're born into this world, and when we're born into this world, we already have a view of a sense of self, and with that comes the idea of permanence. And because we are born in this way, we come into the world with this kind of view, then we will perceive things in accordance with that view, because the view is like the background that then informs how we perceive things. So we perceive, when we look at the world, we see permanence. We see reliability. We see things as solid in a certain way because the view that we bring with us into this world. And because we perceive things in that way, we think about things in that way. We think things are much more lasting than they actually are. We forget that everything is really shaky, really dodgy. We have no idea what's going to happen next. So we think like that. And because we think like that, it reinforces our view. And it goes around and around like that. And there is no real escape from that. Because all of these mental faculties, they kind of support each other. And there's no way out unless there is a Buddha arising in the world. And he then points you in a different direction. So this is what is the problem. We see all of these things. And it comes, ultimately, it is rooted in the idea of a self. It comes from this feeling that I am somebody. I don't know, what do you think? You agree? It feels like you are somebody. Here I am. It feels much more solid than it actually is. And this is a feeling that we are born with as part of this view, Sakkaya Ditthi and these kind of things. And the moment you feel solid, at that moment, you have a vested interest in things in the world being permanent as well. If you feel that you are an existing entity, and you start to think about it, you realize, actually, I have to find that permanence somewhere. It must be somewhere in me. Where exactly is it? And there are certain perceptions that you have. This feels like me. You may know sometimes you wake up in the morning, you feel a bit funny. I don't feel like myself this morning. You've had that feeling sometimes. You feel kind of a bit off. And then you know that you have an attachment to a certain perception. The real you is different. This is not the real you. You know that there's something there which you take to be yourself. And so the moment we have this idea, a sense of self, we also have attachments or ideas about certain aspects of us that actually refer to that sense of self, that are that sense of self. And then we have a vested interest in those things being permanent. By their very nature, we're going to have a vested interest in that because it is me. But the strange thing about the idea of me and I, it doesn't really stop with the body. It doesn't stop with who we are inside of ourselves. It actually reaches out into the world. Because the way we define ourselves, our sense of me and I, is often in relation to other beings. It is, I am such and such a person in the family. I have such and such a situation within the company. I have ownership of such and such things. This is my car. This is my apartment. So that sense of self leaches into the world. It kind of goes into the world. And because the sense of self is defined in terms of external things, it means that you also have a sense of vested interest in those external things being permanent. Yeah, you see them the way you want to see them. This is mine. You want to see it as permanent, and lo and behold, you're going to see it as permanent, or at least more permanent than you should. Yeah, you don't realize how impermanent it is. This is part of the problem. So you can see what's going on here. The sense of self, it skews everything in the world. It turns everything into far more reliable than it actually is. In one way, you kind of know that it is impermanent, but even though you know that, you don't really grasp it fully, because the sense of self blocks you from being able to see what is actually going on. That is the problem. That's why we have the confounding problem of impermanence. Yeah, there is really your answer. And one of the very interesting things that arises from this, that I always found kind of fascinating, is the idea that once we have an idea, inner sense of self, we tend to project that inner idea also onto the universe. And that idea of projecting the inner sense of self onto the universe, seeing an outer kind of permanence as well, that is what creates the idea of a permanent God. Yeah? The vast majority of religions in the world, they have an idea. That's Thor, by the way. But he's not permanent, right? He's different. Thor is cool. Thor is pretty good. I'll tell you the difference between Thor and the other gods in a second. So this is where this idea of the permanent gods comes from. Yeah, the permanent God, because we have an inner sense of permanence, so we project that onto the universe. Yeah, this is how you get theistic religions. The vast majority of religions in the world are theistic. They have some idea of a permanent God in the world. In fact, one of the religions that the Buddha himself was rebelling against was the Brahmanical religion, which has the idea of a Brahma being the permanent essence of the universe. Yeah, behind all the stars, behind all the galaxies, behind all that, there is the permanent Brahma in the world. And that was one of the things the Buddha was rebelling against. But to me, and I guess I like to be a bit controversial, but to me, the whole idea of a permanent God doesn't make any sense. Yeah, it's kind of, it's so obviously a man-made idea when you think about it. And the reason is because it's impossible. You know, sometimes you hear people say, oh yeah, I have experienced God, and because I have experienced God, I know that there is a God out there. But remember that the attributes of God are such that they can never be experienced. One of the attributes of God is supposed to be that he is permanent, he's ever-present, he's beyond time or whatever, yeah? He's always there, or she is always there, or it is always there, whatever this God is. But how can you experience something permanent? It's impossible to have an experience like that. Because everything we experience arises and then passes away. And even if you have a very profound experience, like a deep samadhi state, or a jhana state, or whatever, you know that it only arises, you have it for a while, and it's gone again. If you say, that is God, you're adding something to the experience that the experience does not contain. One of those attributes is the idea of permanence. Permanence can never be experienced. And so we kind of know from the outset that the idea of a permanent creator God is a man-made idea, or a woman-made idea, or whatever, right? It comes from people's imagination, because it cannot be, by definition, be experienced. And it's so obvious when you think about it, and yet this is exactly what we kind of, how many people believe, for no good reason. So this is the kind of things that led me to, you know, when I grew up, I guess as a child, I kind of had this naive idea of a God, but there came an age where I just thought, this is just, you know, I can't believe in this, it doesn't make any sense. So it kind of disappeared by the wayside. And so what is so fascinating is that the idea of the gods that we have in Buddhism, the idea of temporary gods who get reborn maybe in a realm yourself, gods are just glorified human beings, they're a bit more happy than us, they have a bit more power, basically just like us, yeah? They have to die eventually, and they grieve, and they have all these kind of things. They have wars in heaven. Have you ever thought about that? Yeah, it's interesting. Wars in heaven. So they have all of these things. They're just glorified human beings in many ways. There's nothing kind of special about them. I can believe in those gods because at least those gods are experienceable. Yeah, an impermanent God is something that you can make sense of. But as a permanent God is not something you can really make sense of. So I have much more faith in Thor than I have in a permanent God. Isn't that kind of cool? I thought that was so cool when I realized that actually Thor, especially when you hear the thunder, is much more realistic than the permanent God of some religions. And I wanted to go and annoy some people who believe in permanent God and say, yeah, Thor, that's the one. No, no, I stopped annoying people because I know it's just a really bad idea to go around annoying people. But when you start thinking about these things, actually, and what is so weird is that, you look at kind of, especially maybe Western culture, you think that, we go through this evolution, we become more and more sophisticated. Originally, we thought about all these gods who have kind of different functions in the universe. Some produce thunder, some are fertility gods, some are all kind of stuff. And then we got more sophisticated. We unified it all into one God, really sophisticated. Actually, it was a step backwards, That's my point. Actually, the original gods are far more realistic than this idea of one God. We've got it really backwards. This is a function of not seeing impermanence. This is a function of grasping on to the idea of a self. I apologize if I offend anyone here. I don't really mean to be offensive. But I just want to say things as I see them, right? And I hope you don't mind. So this is what happens when we get these things wrong. So what can we do? How can we change our perception? What is the part of Buddhism that helps us seeing things in a better way? And there's a large number of things, ways of reflecting on this. But one of the little verses I was just reading the other day, this is a verse from the Sutta Nipata, one of the beloved books of Buddhism, has all these very profound and beautiful verses. And one of the things it says in this verse, it says that if you really saw how impermanent and unreliable your possessions are, you become a monk straight away. That's what it says. You would go forth because you realize, actually, there's nothing here to hold on to. This is all impermanent. It's unreliable. It could disappear at any moment. What's the point of being a householder and holding on to these things? Okay, become a monk. Bodhinyana monastery, first flight. Bing, shave off your hair. Or Dhammasara monastery if you want to become a nun. And what that shows us is kind of how little we really have grasped of these things. I'm not saying that I have grasped it fully either, but somehow you end up being a monk. But this shows you how much scope there is for more wisdom, how much scope there is for more insight. If you fully understood how impermanent these things are, you would go forth straight away. Because you realize, actually, I'm standing on quicksand. Everything is liable to just fall away at any time. I could die tomorrow. Who knows what could happen? It's kind of really fascinating, isn't it? And it shows you there how far we have to go in terms of reflecting on these things. So what can you do? And one of the ways of thinking about your possessions, and this is one of the beautiful ways that you find in the suttas, is to think of everything as borrowed. Everything in your life is borrowed. So try to see, when you go back home tonight, think of all the possessions that you have as not really yours. They belong to someone else. You don't know who it is. You are in someone else's apartment. All the possessions belong to this other person. How does that feel when you go back home? If you look at everything in your life as borrowed, even your relationships with the people around you, they are just borrowed. They are there for a while. How does that feel? That is the kind of way that we should look at the world around us. That is when we can start to give rise to this idea of impermanence, because you relate to everything in a very different way when you have borrowed it, when you think you own it. You don't own it anyway. It just kind of belongs to nature, really. One day nature comes and says, thank you very much, and takes it back again. And then you kind of have a problem as a consequence. So try to use that perception. And when you use that perception of things being borrowed in your life, things start to lose their substantiality. They seem much more kind of, why am I holding on to this if it's borrowed? It's kind of crazy. It's going to be taken back by the owner at any time. And when you do that, if you do that in the right way, and it starts to work for you, you have this kind of, it has this visceral feeling. You feel like something. It feels different. Your feeling about the world and these things kind of change. And this visceral feeling, this is kind of the idea of the Buddhist path. I was talking about this morning. It's not an intellectual path. It's a felt path. And when you can feel things like impermanence in your mind, in your body, wow, you really feel it. Now I understand what impermanence is like. This is all borrowed. Try that perception and see if it can give rise to a feeling. And if you can feel that perception in your life, you can feel that thing, that is when it will have a powerful effect in your practice. Then it will change you, because you will start to look at things in a different way. And it will start to give you that little extra fuel that will make you become a better person, more kind, more caring, because you understand how unreliable everything in the world is. Everything is borrowed goods. Nothing is reliable. Everything is so uncertain. See if you can make use of that. One of the other great teachings in the suttas that I sometimes I really enjoy as well is the idea of a dream. That the world in many ways is like a dream. There is no real substance to the world around us. And I used to think that what it means is that it's a dream because when we think about the future, we think about the way the world is going to be. I'm going to live like this. I'm going to, have all of these things. And then, of course, it never turns out the way we think things are going to be. I'm going to have this house, and it's your dream apartment in Singapore, your dream house. It is in one way, right? But actually, when you get it, it's not as good as you thought it was. It's always there's always some downsides with these houses. There's more cleaning to be done. There's more there's cracks happening. It starts falling apart as soon as you get it. This is the way of things, right? It is never as good as you think it's going to be. So this is what I used to think. It's about this idea. The dream is about the world never living up to what we expect it to be. And that is true, it's true. The relationship is never quite as good as we thought it was going to be, etc., etc., etc. But there's another way of thinking about the idea of a dream, and that occurred to me recently when I was reading another sutta. This is why I love reading the suttas, because they always give rise to insights and understandings that I didn't expect. And what this sutta was saying is that the idea of a dream is used also with regard to people. And the Buddha is saying that someone in your life, your loved ones, your friends, whoever it is, they die. And when they are dead, it is like a dream. A person, it's like you're waking up in the morning from a dream, and all those beautiful things that you saw in the dream, that beautiful relationship with that person, it has evaporated. It's as if it was never there. And if you start to think about some of your relationships in your life, people who have disappeared, people who have passed away, it's like they have evaporated. And you wonder, was it ever true? And this is just such a powerful way of thinking about life. I don't know about you, but sometimes I think about places I have been before, and I compare it to what it is like now. And recently we have been doing some building work at Bodhinyana Monastery, building some more cuties, always building more cuties, never enough cuties. So if you want to become a monk, not easy to become a monk at Bodhinyana Monastery. Always trying to build more because the waiting list is longer than the samsara almost. It's really long waiting list. But which is actually very nice in one way, but a bit of a shame in another way. But so the forest was there. We have quite a large piece of land. You'd be surprised how much land we have. It's like you start to understand why you can't have a monastery in Singapore when you see this. Australia is great. Few people, lots of land. It's great for monasticism. So we had this beautiful place of forest, of bush in Western Australia near the monastery. And then I walked through this bush and I thought, wow, this is so beautiful here. Beautiful trees, we have this beautiful white gums in Australia, often very, very beautiful trees. You have the kangaroos running around, no tigers in Australia, just kangaroos, Very fortunate in that way. And of course a few ticks and mosquitoes, but forget about those. And so this is beautiful. This is the place to have cuties, because it will be very nice, it will be very secluded. All you can see is forest as far as the eye can see. That's very powerful when all you can see is forest. It feels very secluded in a sense. So we start fixing it up. So we have to take down a few trees. We have to level the ground a little bit. Then we have to lay the foundations. The kuti comes up. Then we build the walking path in a long stretch of ground. And now it is almost finished. The walking paths are in place. Monks are already moving into those kutis. And then I think to myself, what did this look like when I first came here and I saw this beautiful piece of forest? And I can't even imagine anymore what it looked like. It's like it's completely gone. It's been erased from my mind. It's impossible to remember what it was like. If you try to remember what Singapore was like, yeah, especially downtown Singapore, where they build new high-rises all the time, what it was like 30 years ago, can you even remember what it was like? It's hard to remember, right? It's hard to imagine what it was. It's like the world is gone forever. You can never again go back to that state. And that is like a dream. Yeah, it's like reality has disappeared. And you wonder if that was the case 30 years ago, the same right now. This too is in a sense like a dream. There's no substance to it. It's insubstantial. We will leave, we'll be gone in an hour's time. And it was like, did that meeting ever happen? Did this monk ever visit Singapore? Who is that monk anyway? Yeah, and so this is what happens. And so you look back in your past life, and I sometimes go back to places I lived 30 years ago when I still lived in Norway. It's a long time ago now. I'm not even sure if I'm Norwegian anymore, for goodness sake. I've been living outside of Norway for so long. Actually, I'm not. I'm actually half Aussie and half Aussie, half Norwegian. But anyway. And I go back to those places, and I look at the house I lived in when I was a teenager, and I think, did I live here? How come I was attached to this place? How come I was attached to this house? It doesn't make any sense to me anymore at all. It's completely gone, left my life, yeah? And then when you start to look at things like that, you start to realize, well, if that is the case now, those people I knew then, they too have left my life. What about in 10 years' time? 20 years' time, in 30 years' time, if I'm still alive, probably not, but let's say 20 years' time, I'm still maybe still alive. I could be dead tomorrow, of course, but just let's assume for a second. This now, whatever I'm attached to now, whether it's my brother or mother, I don't think I'm all that attached, but I mean, there's always some attachments in life, yeah? Maybe the 𝐾𝐡𝐚𝐦𝐻 in the forest, maybe that's one of the things I'm most attached to. That too will be gone. It will be like a dream. There's Thor again. Either he approves or he disapproves. I'm not sure which one it is, one of those. And so remember that, yeah? In 20 years' time, the attachments that you have now, they will be very different in 20 years' time. You will look back and you wonder, how come I was so attached to these people? Yeah, to these places. And that is just within one lifetime. But now, expand even further. Think about it in terms of multiple lifetimes. Remember, in a past life, you would have been attached to people. Maybe you had kids. Maybe you had a husband or wife. You probably had parents. Well, you would have had to have some sort of parents, unless you were, I don't know, some whatever. But all those attachments were there in the past life. What do they mean to you now? Nothing. They're completely irrelevant. And still, in that past life, you would have cried. You would have been desperate. You would have been sad. You would have been sorrowing and grieving when those attachments were broken, yeah, and you had no choice but to carry on. So remember that in this life. In your next life, this life will seem like your past life seems in this life. In your next life, you look back to this life and think, well, why was I attached to all that stuff in this life? Doesn't make any sense. In your next life, you're going to be attached to new things, right? New people. Isn't that kind of crazy? Then you go a life beyond that, and you're going to be attached to new things again. And every time you're going to cry, every time you're going to grieve, every time it's going to be the same heartbreak. It's madness, isn't it? When you start to look at the big picture, and when you start to look at your present life from the eyes of a future life, you start to understand that these attachments you have now actually are not very wise. Yeah, it's kind of silly. Why be attached to all of these things when in my next life I'm going to see crazy? Yeah, it's all gone. It's all disappeared. Why was I even attached to those things in the first place? And this is a beautiful way of getting a bit more distance. A beautiful way of detaching a little bit from what you have now. Yeah, and starting to be more independent. Because you realize unless you have that independence, you're just doing the same thing over and over again. Always grieving, always lamenting. You kind of run around life, joyful, happy, yay, everything is so wonderful, and someone dies. Oh no, it's desperate. Life after life after life. So remember that, the simile of the dream. Yeah, one day you wake up, it is all gone. All you have left, as the Buddha said in this marvelous sutta I was starting out with, all you have left is the name of the person. Everything else seems like a dream. It's gone and disappeared. And when you think about the world like that, you let go a little bit. And when you let go a little bit, you have a little bit less suffering. and you can care for the world in a more wholesome way, because now you look at these things not through your own desires, through your own vested interest, but through the eyes of someone who has more neutrality and more ability to see things with wisdom. So this is how you go about things. You detach a little bit. You understand the idea. This is how impermanence becomes more clear to you. And as you do that, this confounding idea, problem of impermanence becomes a little bit less confounding. And you start to gain more clarity in your life. I was saying before today, during the dependent origination workshop, I was saying that we, in this life, we tend to be afraid of things that we should not be afraid of. And we're not afraid of the things that we should be afraid of. We are afraid of the world going wrong. We're afraid of our life being impermanent. Of course they are impermanent. We're afraid of people dying. We're afraid of wars, of climate change, all the things going wrong in the world. But this is the way the world is. It's not very helpful to be afraid of it. It's actually a waste of time. And anyway, that is not really where your happiness is made. Your happiness is made in a much deeper level. Your happiness is made when we live well. That is what really matters. If you live well, if you live with a good heart, hard times may come, but you will be able to deal with it because you have like a baseline of happiness that you can rely on in difficult times. So what you should really be afraid of is doing bad things, because that really does create a bad future for yourself. We should not be worried about people dying. Okay, people die, please, die, be my guest. It's really, that's not really the big problem. The problem is how we live. That is what we should be afraid of. So make sure that you have the fear in the right place. I don't really mean that you should be fearful. I just mean you should be clear about what really matters in the world. Put your emphasis on that. And then, when the difficulties come, and they will always come, you will be able to deal with them. You have a much happier life in this existence, let alone in future existences. That is the right way to think about things. So there's one more thing about impermanence that kind of ties us with this idea of living well and understanding what happiness really is about. Now, one of the problems in the world is that because we have a sense of self, and because it is so hard to see our own impermanence and how we are changeable, it is very easy to think that the way we are now is the way we always have to be. When people get very depressed, sometimes they commit suicide because it is so terrible to be depressed. You buy into the permanence of that feeling of being depressed. You think this is the way it's always going to be. That's why you tend to commit suicide. You forget the changeability. And this is one of the things we have to also remember on the spiritual path, is that the potential for happiness, the potential for changing our mind state, for actually becoming much brighter and happy beings, is so enormous. I was just reading out today these beautiful suttas on how meditation works when meditation really takes off, how it is happiness upon happiness upon happiness, peace upon peace upon peace, as we do this. So remember that. Have that confidence in the word of the Buddha, that the transformation of our psychology, of our psyche, of who we are, it has such enormous potential. Don't buy into the idea that who you are now is how you're always going to be. The potential is enormous. That is the upside of impermanence. We can really transform ourselves into different kind of beings if we live in the right way. This is the kind of the danger of thinking about things being permanent in our life. There too, we have to be careful, and you have to allow for this amazing transformation that can happen on the Buddhist path. And that, of course, happens really during meditation. Ultimately, all of these things that I've been talking about, all these ideas of impermanence, they are very useful. When we remember the impermanence of the world, when we remember the impermanence of all our attachments, when we see that the sensory realm is so out of control, who would have thought there was going to be a war in Ukraine? Did any of you predict the war in Ukraine? It would have been pretty amazing if you did. I would like to talk to you afterwards if you predicted the war in Ukraine. But so it's so hard to predict, to understand what is going on. The world is so incredibly out of control. And because the world is so out of control, we start to lose interest in that world. We withdraw from it. We no longer rely on it. This is what the idea of impermanence really does to you. It allows you to withdraw from a world that you can never really be in charge of. You can never predict what is going to happen next. You start to understand, actually, it is very unsatisfactory for my happiness to be reliant on that world, which is so out of control. It is like asking for suffering if you want your happiness to be relying on that world, because it's never going to go the way you want it to go. And this is what I mean by kind of initial insight into the nature of reality. Seeing the world of the five senses for what it is. Understanding that it's never going to live up to your expectations. It is always going to lead to tears in the end. It's going to end in tears, as they say. It is funny if it wasn't so sad, in a sense. So when you start to see that, what you do, you start to withdraw. And this is one of those beautiful little things that you can use in your meditation. You will notice that in your meditation very often you think about worldly things. You think about problems you want to resolve. You think about your family, you think about the future, all of that. But actually, that future is out of control. It is never going to, the problems that you have are never going to be resolved. There's always going to be another problem after the present one. It's always going to be problematic. And because of that, you withdraw your interest from that world. And you start to understand, it is now that my future is made. My future is not made by resolving those problems. My future is made by finding happiness and being still in the present. That is where it is made, because this is where I produce all those good things. The positive mind states and all of that. Now is where I make my present. So why think about the future? Why think about those problems if they are irrelevant for my future anyway? Once that clicks, you stop thinking about the future, because you understand, actually, it's irrelevant. Now I'm doing what is relevant. It's a wonderful way of abandoning this concern, this ever-thinking mind, always proliferating about things. Then your meditation starts to work. Then your meditation starts to bite. And then you become calmer and calmer in your meditation. You experience more and more bliss, because that is one of the byproducts of calming the mind, is the bliss arising inside as well. The bliss comes up. The mind becomes more peaceful. And of course, one day you enter a state of samadhi, a profound state of meditation that you have never been in before. And when you come out of those very profound states, that is where you start to understand impermanence in the real way, in the really, really profound way. Until one day you take it so far and you become a stream enter. You see the world as it actually is. This is kind of the goal of this whole path. And when you see the world for what it is, for what it actually is, that is where those vipalasas, those distortions of the mind that I was talking about at the beginning, they start to get overturned. It starts with a ditthi vipalasa, the distortion of view. And suddenly you understand what the world actually is like. And you don't make these mistakes ever again after that. That is where it really changes. And then, when the world changes, then when there is another pandemic, then when there's another tsunami, then when there's whatever it is always going to be something. We don't know what it's going to be. We have no idea what it's going to be, but guaranteed it's going to be something. You say, yeah, I expected that. Why? Because I'm a stream enter. Right? Isn't that cool? Then you can be at ease in the world. You're no longer surprised when someone dies. So Ajahn Brahmali died. Oh yeah, I expected that. So it's okay. Maybe I too should expect that, right? And then we are on the right track. And then you will not gain. Then the confounding problem of impermanence is no longer a confounding problem. In fact, it's not a problem at all anymore. It's just a reality. You understand. You see the world as it actually is. So take it stage by stage. Uncover this by just understanding the ordinary experience in your life. Use that as a springboard for your spiritual practice, for understanding that real happiness is created through the spiritual path. And then take it into your meditation until eventually you see this in the most profound way possible. All right, I think I'm all talked out. So that is all I have to. I've been talking all day, so I think that's enough for now. So there you are. That is the little talk on the confounding problem of impermanence.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
So now, if you
Questions?
would like to ask any questions or you have any comments on what I have said or whatever, please feel free to do so.
Is it working? Okay.
Okay.
Thank you for the talk. It's almost like a almost permanent problem of impermanence. But anyway,
Yeah.
I wanted to ask, you were encouraging us to bring it into our meditation. Does it mean like specifically, like if a thought arises,
Yeah.
we think about if that's because of our view, our distorted view of permanence? I mean, how do we actually do that in the
okay.
meditation?
So what the first thing to do is to actually get to know yourself properly and know what your problems are. And you will notice that there are recurring problems in the meditation that come again and again and again. Yeah? And then you ask yourself, well, why am I thinking about this? And you will realize the reason why you're thinking about these things, and often there will be problems in your life, things that are going on. The reason you're thinking about them is because you want to sort out your future. You want to sort out the problems in your life. You want to clear them up. But then you remind her, actually, I cannot sort out life. It's unsortable because there's always going to be more problems down the track. This is just a symptom of the nature of existence that I'm seeing. So if there's always going to be more problems, if actually there is no solution, why even worry about it? Why think about it? So you can use that, often use it outside of meditation, yeah, because that is when you have maybe, you can use it any time to think about this. Just rely, contemplate at any time, basically. And then when you sit down in meditation, because you have contemplated outside of meditation, you can just remember that, yeah? Remember that contemplation. And as soon as you remember it, if it is strong, bang, you will let go straight away of those things. But it takes time, yeah? It is not an easy thing to do. So you have to kind of train yourself over a period of time. And then as you do that, you will be able to eventually to let go. But it is a change in perspective. It is a completely different way of thinking about the world. And it's sometimes it's going to work, sometimes not going to work, because it depends on your defilements on the day and the kind of what's going on in the day. But it's kind of, this is what the whole spiritual path is about. It's about understanding, yeah, that this is actually where you create the future, is through spiritual practice and not really through trying to sort out the world. The world cannot ultimately be sorted out. Does that make sense, or?
On the surface, it seems like I should ignore my problems. I don't know, but I will try. Thank you.
You shouldn't really ignore your problems, because that is also the wrong way of thinking about it. Because you live in the world, you do your best to sort things out, yeah. And if there is a problem, you have to deal with it. But you also understand that when the time comes to meditation, there's no point in thinking about it. So it is really understanding the right time to deal with things. You deal with them because you have to, but not because you think that you are going to create kind of a happy future. But we have to deal with the problems, yeah? If there is whatever is going on in your life, your kids are misbehaving, whatever, okay, you tell them, okay, better not, please stop misbehaving, or whatever it is, yeah? You do the things that you have to do. If there's a problem at work, you deal with that. But you don't buy into the illusion that you're going to be able to solve those things. There is no final solution there. You do it just because you have to, not because there is a solution. And when you understand that there isn't really any solution, it means you also don't get upset with your kids. Have you got children? Yeah. Okay. So I'm on the right track here. Okay. So you don't, right? You don't get upset with them because you know this is the way it has to be. This is the nature of having children. Sometimes they misbehave, sometimes they don't. So you just deal with that without really having too much emotional involvement in those issues. So it has a very great advantages. So you neither disregard it, but nor do you get very involved. That is really the trick there. Yeah.
Thank you, Ajahn.
Yeah.
Ajahn, this question is about death. So when someone dies, you don't bring anything material to the next world. Yeah. Is it the spirit or soul or mind being reborn? And what is the Buddhist teaching of a soul or a spirit? Thank you.
Okay, so what do you take with you from one life to the next one? But it's pretty obvious the things that we don't take with us, yeah? You don't take your loved ones, you don't take your house, you don't take your car. Even if you burn your car, a little paper car, it's not going to go with you into the future. This is a very interesting idea, because I think this is all cultures throughout the world have this idea that you take your material possessions with you. Yeah, in the kind of the old Norwegian Viking culture, they would do the same thing. They would take the they would have the Viking boats, yeah, the kind of long boats that they had in the Viking, and they would put all their belongings in there, and they would bury you with that, and so you can take it with you to Valhalla after you died. Yeah. But it doesn't quite work like that. Yeah,
No,
the
what I meant
reality
is
is that you
that,
have.
do you?
Yeah, I think I'm getting to it. Yeah, just hold on. My answers are very long, right? Because so it's just just hold on a little bit. If I don't get to it eventually, then you let me know. So the only thing that really what goes on from one life to the next one is the mind. Yeah, it is the mind that you have now. So because the mind is what you take with you, you want to have a mind that is as good as possible. That is your real belonging. Remember what the Buddha says in the sutras. It says everything is impermanent, everything has to be let go of. The only thing that you own, according to Buddha, is your karma. Yeah, 𝑘𝐴𝑚𝒂𝒏𝒂𝒏𝒈. You are the owner of your karma. What does that mean? Well, what that means, the karma is really just how you feel about yourself. That's your karma. If you've made a lot of good karma, you feel good about yourself. Made a lot of bad karma, you feel really bad. Yeah. So what you want to do is you want to put a lot of effort, a lot of your investment into how your mind is like. You want to make a bright mind. You want to make a beautiful mind. You want to create a heart that is bright and shining. So because when you die, that is what you take with you into the future. That is what it means, yeah, this idea. So it is a mind that goes with you. But that mind is not a soul. It is not a spirit in the sense of theistic religions. Yeah, the mind is an impermanent thing that is always changing. It's not a kind of solid thing that goes with you. It's an impermanent thing, but its qualities last for a certain time. That's why you bring those qualities with you into the future. And the way to think about that, the way kind of the simile that I find quite useful, is to think of the mind as like a river. In the sutras, they talk about the stream of consciousness. Yeah, that is the mind. So it's like a stream or like a river. Now, if you look at a river, what you will see is that there is no two consecutive moments that it is the same river. It is always different. There's always new molecules, new things that are passing by in that river. You go to the Singapore River, yeah, and you look at that one. So you look at the Singapore River. Okay, anyway, so whatever river you watch, you can see things flowing. Yeah, maybe a river which flows a bit faster, but anyway, and no two consecutive moments is it the same river, but the overall shape of the river is the same. The shape of the river changes very slowly, and that is like the mind. The mind has no two consecutive moments, are not the same. It is always changing, but the overall shape of the mind is the same. So if you tend to be a happy person, that shape of happiness will be taken with you into the future. In the long run, the shape of the river also changes. Yeah, it changes with the seasons. If you go here in Singapore, the seasons are very similar, but if you go to places where there are big variations of the seasons, then there are rainy seasons when the rivers get very swollen, and then there are dry seasons when the river gets very small. So over the long term, the river changes. In the same way, over the long term, the mind changes. But from moment to moment, it is different. Yeah. So this is the kind of Buddhist idea of continuity while it is impermanent. There is no soul there. There's no permanent thing underneath this thing, but there is still a degree of stability, just like a river is stable over the medium term anyway. Does that answer your question? No. Okay, now we can ask. Okay.
So does it mean that there's no concept of soul or spirit in Buddhism?
It depends what you mean by these terms. What is spirit? What is spirit? Spirit is whatever you want to call, whatever you want to define it.
In a very layman way, when someone dies, like you see in the ghost movies, that you have a soul that your loved ones can't see.
Yeah, but this is what I'm saying. The mind is that ghost. Yeah, the mind is the ghost. Yeah, the
Got it.
mind goes on, and so the ghost tick tick. It's like you know, one of the things they say about the mind. The mind is actually very similar to the body. The Buddha says it's like you take it's like a snake. Yeah, the snake, the skin of the snake, it sheds its old skin, but the snake is pretty much still the same afterwards. It looks the same. It's just the skin goes off. Yeah, so when you kind of die, the body disappears, but you are still the same afterwards. Your body is still pretty much the same, but it's more like a mental, it's a lighter kind of body that you have when you die. And other people think you are a ghost. They think, oh,
Got
scary. Mummy, you are died. Go away. I don't want to see you. This is scary after you die. So the ghost is there, but that ghost, that is what we call the mind. Yeah, and that mind is impermanent. It is always changing. It's not a permanent thing here. But it's still a ghost. It is still scary when other people see you. That is the problem. So have you seen ghosts before? You have never seen a ghost? Okay. Okay. Seeing ghosts is a really good idea, you know. So I really recommend seeing ghosts because when you see a ghost, it kind of opens your eye to a different dimension. You see something else. And it kind of gives you this access to a larger reality which many people have never seen. That is very useful. So if there's a ghost, please welcome the ghost and say, I'd like to see the ghosts. Yeah, it's always a very positive thing here. So you, okay, yes, please.
Yeah, if many things are illusions, including consciousness, nirvana, dharma. All these are all illusions.
Are they? Why do you say that?
Then what do we strive for?
Why do you say they're illusions?
Because I read somewhere, I can't remember where, that they say nirvana, dharma, enlightenment, they are also illusions.
Are they? Okay.
Ultimately illusions.
No, don't know who said that. I don't think the Buddha didn't say that, so I'm not sure on what authority this person said that. They're not. The thing is that we need to be very clear about what is illusion and what is not, on the Buddhist path. And we're talking about dependent origination this morning. Were you here for the dependent origination? Of course, no, you're not there. So the very base, the first factor of dependent origination is avidya, which is ignorance or delusion. Yeah, that is kind of the beginning. But the illusion concerns certain very specific things. And the main thing that it concerns is the problem of seeing a self where there is no self. That is the main delusion or illusion that we have, So it's a very specific area, but it doesn't mean that everything is an illusion. If you have pain somewhere, you have pain, right? It's not an illusion. But even if it is an illusion, still pain, so still bad. So it is not that everything is an illusion. That certain specific things are an illusion, and that is where we need to overturn our views. So illusion is the idea of seeing things as permanent when in fact they are not. That kind of makes sense, though, doesn't it? I mean, because if you look around you, nothing really looks permanent. So it kind of makes sense that it should be an illusion. Or seeing happiness in things that are not happy. Your idea of some kind of future state, when I get that, I will be happy. Often that is an illusion because the reality is never as good as the thought about that thing. You know what I mean? You get into a relationship. When you are young, you have this idea of falling in love and having the most perfect, wonderful girl in the universe, Or if you're a woman, the most wonderful husband or boyfriend. Actually, they're never as good as you think. The dream is actually very unrealistic. And this is the illusion. The illusion is that we look at the world in a slightly wrong way. It doesn't mean everything is an illusion. It is certain specific things that are distorted in our mind. So there is a nibbana, there is an ending of suffering. That is the case. There are certain laws of the universe, like dependent origination is a law of the universe. Has to do, works on the mental level, There is a path of practice that leads from suffering to happiness. And then there are certain things where we get our understanding of the world wrong, where you have to define those very clearly. And if you take it too broadly and everything is an illusion, this is not the kind of Buddhism that I believe in. Everything is an illusion. And the only Buddhism I'm interested in really is the word of the Buddha. What did the Buddha teach? And the Buddha never said everything is an illusion.
I remember I read somewhere, they said nirvana ultimately is an illusion. Even dependent arising also ultimately is an illusion. Dharma also an illusion. So if all these are illusion, enlightenment also illusion.
Yeah.
So if all these are illusion, what is there to go for?
So you have to check your sources. Yeah. This is the age of fake news, so be careful. You are very welcome. Please.
Thank you, Ajahn Brahmali, for your talk. I enjoy your talk a lot. You are very humorous, and I like your jokes a lot.
Okay.
And you made me smile and giggle today during a dependent origination workshop, and I smile a bit too during this workshop as well.
Okay,
I
good.
would like to
Yeah.
ask you a question. Is legacy impermanent or permanent? Example, Lee Kuan Yew, former Prime Minister of Singapore.
Yeah. Legacy is impermanent,
Is
right?
legacy
Yeah.
impermanent or permanent?
Impermanent. Yeah. You know, this is so Lee Kuan Yew. I know Lee Kuan Yew. He was a very, very famous statesman around the world. Yeah. And so he will be remembered for a while, yeah, and then one day he will be completely gone. The memory will be gone. You wonder whether he ever existed. In fact, you won't even wonder that because he's completely gone. It's like, you know, even the most famous people in the world, like the Buddha, even the Buddha's legacy is impermanent. It has now lasted for 2,500 years. Eventually the Buddha's teaching will be completely gone. No one will remember that. Each one of us, eventually we will be completely gone as well. We are so concerned about our life now, how we look, how we are, that other people like us and all these kind of things. But it won't be too long because before no one ever knew that we even existed. Yeah, we will be wiped off the surface of the planet and nothing will be left of us. And then we wonder, why do we worry so much about our reputation? It kind of is so short term anyway, yeah, it's kind of irrelevant. So it means you can relax a bit more. Just be yourself, right? That's kind of the great thing about it. If you have no legacy, you can just be whatever. It's okay. But be kind.
Thank you. Thank you, Ajahn. We'll take a few questions from the online people.
Yeah.
Ajahn shared about a sutta which teaches if we can see how impermanent things are, we would go forth and become a monk. Which sutta is this?
Okay, I can tell you roughly where it is. It's in the Sutta Nipata, the Atthakavagga, the fourth chapter in the Sutta Nipata. I think it is Sutta number 1 or number 3. One of them is called the Kama Sutta, which is kind of an amazing title, Kama Sutra. It's a Kama Sutra. It's exactly the same word as the famous, but the content very different. And then there is another sutta, which is chapter number 3, which is called the Jara Sutta, which means the sutta on old age. It's one of those two sutras. So check it out there, and you can figure it out. So fourth chapter, Sutta Nipata, either Sutta number 1 or Sutta number 3. It's a very beautiful chapter, by the way. I would really recommend you to read that. It's the Atthakavagga, chapter of 8, and it is some of the most ancient poems in all of Buddhism. Yeah, you find them in translation into ancient Chinese, they find them in Pali, you find them in different languages, and they are referred to elsewhere in the Pali canon. And when something is referred to elsewhere, you know it must be very ancient, right? And it's kind of, it was known about in the Buddhist, at the Buddha's time. It's an interesting story from the 𝑉𝒎𝒑𝒐𝒏𝒂𝒏𝒄𝒆. The 𝑉𝒎𝒑𝒏𝒂𝒏𝒄𝒆 is the collection on things about the rules for the monastics and about all the regulations for monastics, how we make decisions together and all of those kind of things. And there's a story there of a monk who comes to the Buddha. This monk lives in a faraway country called the Sunaparanta country. It's a really wild place, yeah. It's dusty and the dogs are biting and no monks want to go there. But this monk happens to be in this country, so he's far away from the Buddha. And he says to his master or his teacher, "Can I please go and see the Buddha?" And eventually the teacher relents, "Okay, go and see the Buddha." So he goes to the Buddha. And then the Buddha sees him and meets him. And then he says to this monk, "Can you recite some Dhamma for me? Yeah, what Dhamma do you know?" And then he recites the Atthakavagga. This is what he recites. So these were obviously teachings that were very well known in early Buddhism and that were kind of shared among the monastic community in this way. So check it out. It's a really, really nice collection of verses. A bit profound, and you may think, what is this all about? Or you might enjoy it, who knows? And we'll, if you read it, and then we can maybe bring it up at some other time if you wish.
Thank you, Ajahn. Another question. If life is pretty enjoyable, good food and good friends to hang out with and enjoyable holidays, how can we see impermanence and want to practice?
That's why you need to see it, because you are buying into the happiness of the present moment. That's when we get very, we kind of get stupid when we're too happy. Things are going too well. Yeah, we get complacent. We forget that things actually are impermanent. This is kind of my whole point of this talk. We just don't know what's going to happen next. Well, actually, we know things are going to change. That's absolutely sure. And one day you may not get hold of those good things anymore. One of the stories that I have told quite a lot, I think I've told it here in Singapore before as well, is the story I read about the Second World War. Second World War was really catastrophic around the world, including Norway, where I grew up. It wasn't as bad in Norway as in the rest of Europe, because much of Europe was completely destroyed, but Norway was kind of a bit on the outskirts. Still, it was bad. And yet, this man who wrote this book soon after the Second World War, he said that the paradox was that people during the war were more happy than they were before the war. Isn't that kind of really weird? And it was very fascinating. And he was trying to explain what was going on. And this is actually what we have been seeing recently in places like Ukraine as well. Some people say, I'm actually more happy now. And they kind of feel guilty. How can I be happy? Yeah, everything is kind of collapsing around me. And he said that the reason why they felt more happy was because suddenly they started having more compassion for each other. They started working together. They started caring for each other. Normally, we can be so fault-finding, yeah, and we can be so harsh on each other. But suddenly now, everyone working together. We have a common enemy. We have a common problem that we need to resolve. And even though people were dying, even though they weren't able to get hold of food, because food had to be rationed during the Second World War, it was hard to get hold of clothes, yeah, because the whole international trade, etc., started to collapse. Even though the material world was terrible, your houses were being destroyed, they were actually more happy. Hope it isn't COVID. I just heard today that one of the people I had lunch with the other day had COVID on the table. I thought, gee, okay, interesting. But it was a bit of a distance, so hopefully it should be okay, but who knows. No, this is probably more like a sore throat, actually. Too much talking. And of course, what you get from that idea is that actually the spiritual qualities, the qualities of compassion, of caring or whatever, they are more important for our happiness than the external things. The whole external world was collapsing, but because they were building up spiritual qualities through caring for each other, through looking out for each other, through banding together, and all of these kind of things, they were actually more happy. It said something that what is really important for our happiness in life. Yeah, we place so much store on the external things as if they are important, but actually they are far less important than we think. So remember that this situation you're in, good friends, good food or whatever, it is so unreliable. Suddenly your friends die. Suddenly your food can no longer be had. Suddenly you're in the war zone. Suddenly climate change turns everything upside down. Whatever it is, suddenly there's another tsunami. This time it washes over Singapore. I guess it's unlikely because you have so many islands around Singapore. But there's a volcano on Sumatra or whatever. I don't know what could happen, right? Anything can happen. It's very uncertain. So if you rely on those things, if you can become complacent just because things are good now, ask yourself what Singapore was like during the Second World War. It was pretty bad during the Second World War, right? The Japanese were here. There were kind of camps and things where all the kind of soldiers were kind of put together. It was a pretty rough time in Singapore also during the Second World War. I don't know too much about the history, but I know that the war came all the way here. So remember that it can happen again. It will happen again, guaranteed to happen again, one way or another. And when you remember that, you won't be so complacent. And then remind yourself what really matters in life.
Thank you, Ajahn. Another question. Thank you for referring to the profundity of Parinibbana Sutta. I have one issue about the sutta that I thought one day I should ask you. The question is, the Buddha prohibits the monks from showing off psychic powers. However, in Parinibbana Sutta, it was recorded that the Buddha and his retinue had flown across the Ganges River from Pataliputta to Kotigama. Wonder why, in that specific occasion, the Buddha decided to deviate from his own teaching.
Yeah. Maybe there were no lay people around, yeah? Maybe he just kind of flew off because there was no lay people there. Nobody saw it. He just kind of disappeared and reappeared. I don't know, yeah, it's a possibility. Or it could be, I think the most likely thing is that it is an exaggerated story. I probably think it didn't happen. I don't think the Buddha actually did that. I think it's very unlikely. But you know what it's like. Remember, the Mahaparinibbana Sutta is a story. It's a narrative. It's something that was written down long time after the Buddha. It contains elements that happened after the Buddha passed away. We know that already, so we know it must have been composed after the Buddha. And you know what people are like? When they want to write about their biggest master, they're going to remember things that didn't really happen. I see this all the time because I live with monks and I hear about other monks and I can see how stories get bigger and bigger and bigger and exaggerated. I know how this works, right? And this has been like that, guaranteed all the way back to the time of the Buddha. Even just listening to Ajahn Brahm is very interesting. I don't know if you have noticed that with Ajahn Brahm, but his stories, have you noticed how they've changed a little bit over the years? They become slightly different, yeah? But it's just the nature of stories. Yeah, they're not solid because no one has recorded the original version, therefore we kind of keep it the same. Because our minds are like that, yeah, and then things just evolve. So anything that was written down after the Buddha is inherently unreliable. The things that we can rely on are those suttas that were recorded by memory by many monks and nuns at the time. This is the word of the Buddha. We have to record it specifically. We have to remember it in the right way. Many people came together, chanted it together so as to keep the meaning the same. Well, that is very reliable. But the stories are fundamentally unreliable. So I wouldn't put much store in that at all. I would just kind of think, whatever. Doesn't matter what it's saying there.
Thank you, Ajahn. Another question. I can understand impermanence of the external stuff, that is the world. But I struggle to internalize the impermanence of my views, my thoughts, and my beliefs, which I feel is good. I tend to be self-righteous as a consequence. Those seem really difficult to let go and cause me a lot of stress. Yeah. Could Ajahn provide us with some strategies to alleviate this thinking?
Well, you don't let go of your views. I mean, it's good. It's useful to have views. In fact, you have no choice. We all have to have views. That's part of life. It's not about giving up your views, really. It is more about holding your views with a bit more humility and understanding that by definition, if you're not a noble one, you have wrong view, at least to some extent. Yeah, this is the whole point of the Buddhist path, is to arrive at right view, to see the world in the right way. So if you're not already a stream enterer, guaranteed that you have some wrong view. So that doesn't mean that you should abandon all your views, because some views are more conducive to more right view, other views are more conducive to more wrong view. So if you are roughly on the right track, keep those views, but hold them lightly. Yeah, that is really the trick. Because other people, yeah, I would say, are even more likely to have even more wrong views. So why should we allow ourselves to be conditioned by other people? Except if they are the Buddha, okay, then you can allow yourself to be conditioned. Yeah, then it's okay. Or if there is someone who speaks in accordance with the word of the Buddha, yeah, allow yourself to be conditioned. Look at the qualities of a person. If you see someone who has very amazing qualities, yeah, then that is probably a place where you can put some confidence and faith, and you can allow yourself to be conditioned by that person. So don't jettison your view. Don't take on board other people's views. Just hold your own views a little bit more lightly, and then improve on them over time. Be open to changing your mind. Yeah, understand that you already have some wrong views. So changing your mind is not a bad thing. It's a good thing. People who cannot change their mind, in my opinion, are foolish. If you are so sure of yourself that you're not able to change your mind when you're wrong, there's something wrong with you. Yeah, we should all be able to change our minds. Otherwise, it becomes a matter of pride. Yeah, my view is right. I'm not going to listen to you. That's crazy. You're not going to make any spiritual progress if that's your attitude. It's a good thing to change your mind when you know that you're wrong. And this is exactly the opposite of what happens online. When people have these debates, it becomes a matter of pride. Who's going to win the debate? Don't win debates. It's a fool's errand to go around winning debates online, because it has nothing to do with truth. It has to do with who is the most clever in debating. Being clever in debating is a very different thing from being truthful. People often win debates not because they are right, but because they are clever. And that is a fool's game. So don't buy into those things. So just be humble. Remember that from the Buddhist point of view, your view is not going to be perfect. So for that reason, be open to changing, and then you're going to be on the right track. Something like that.
Thank you, Ajahn. There are a few more questions from online, but let's go to anyone from the floor who would like to ask.
We have one over here, Eiling.
Okay.
Well, welcome back, Ajahn Brahmali.
Thank you.
Leading from the previous question about the mind and the spirit and the soul, so if you're saying that the snake is like the snake shedding the skin, and that's the mind, but that sounds very close to the other religions' kind of spirit or the soul. So I was thinking, is it because the mind it's not to an individual person, it's actually shared? That's one, or is it different?
Not really. The thing is that in Buddhism, there's no kind of absolute duality between mind and body. It is about degrees of mind and body. Yeah. So the kind of mind which has a physical body, it's not really pure mind. There's still some degree of body there. It's just a more refined kind of version of body. So if you get reborn in a kind of different realms, you can have different refinement of the body. And it's only really when you go all the way to the material realm that the body is completely gone. So Buddhism doesn't have this duality, in a sense, between mind and body. It has different degrees of everything, and different degrees of holding on, and different degrees of what mind is. But pure mind, of course, is going to be very abstract and very kind of, it's going to be. But that's very, very hard to get to that particular point. That doesn't really answer your question, does it? Does it answer your question?
I don't know enough to know whether that answers my question.
Okay. So think about it. I don't think it is the same as. Buddhism has a very kind of sophisticated view of this, and it's very kind of different from some of the. I think many, depending on really what you do. Some religions have this idea that there is mind, and then there is a body, and then there is spirit, and it's like a duality. In Buddhism, it's this kind of enormous range of different potential for things, but ultimately none of it is permanent. Everything is really relative to something else, and is always changing. So regardless of what it is, there's no permanent essence in any of it. And this is kind of the difference between the idea of a soul in most religions. Soul means something permanent, almost by definition. It means that there is an essence in you, which is the real you. Actually, in Buddhism, there is no such real you in Buddhism. And this is what makes Buddhism so unique in many ways.
Thank you, Ajahn. There's one question here. In respect to the mind, what did Buddha really mean when he uttered Mano, Vijnana and Chitta? Is Mano, Vijnana a rational mind and Chitta an emotional mind?
Mano Vijnana is, when we talk about the six senses, we have six external senses, and then you have the mind sense as the sixth one. So Mano Vijnana is the consciousness related to the mind sense. So it is separated from the other senses. So it is something like you go into a a jhana state, a deep samadhi state, all the five senses are turned off. That what you have left with is the mano vijnana. Chitta is like a term for the whole of mind. All mental content, is like the chitta. So even mental content that relates to the other senses. Let's say you are, when you have a sense experience, that will also is part of the mind, because you have to be conscious of a sense experience. That also is part of the mind, that experience itself. So chitta is like an overall term, whereas mano vijnana is like a very narrow term for the pure mind consciousness, devoid of the other five senses. That's really the difference, as I understand it.
Thank you, Ajahn. The second part of his question, when we passed on, what happens to mano vijnana? Is mano vijnana going to be transformed into rebirth consciousness in search of the next nama rupa? Mano vijnana is part of the mind, so just think of it as the mind going on. Don't try to make it too technical, because you cannot lose the feeling for what is going on by getting too technical about things. But the mind you have now, when you die, that mind carries on. It moves into the future, moves into your next life. Does it search for rebirth? It's just like in this life. Do you search? It continues, because a craving makes it continue, and so it carries on through that craving, and then the rebirth happens as a consequence. Are you searching for it? I guess in a way you could say that, but it is not. It is just the natural force of the mind that moves it towards rebirth. It's not a particular kind of search in the ordinary usage of the word search. Anyway, I think, shall we call it a day? I think my mind is kind of saying enough, so I... Yes, thank you, Ajahn.
So, great. So what do we want to do now?
We have the last part, how to go about making some aspirations for VESAK and some blessings.
Okay, that's really nice, isn't it? So how do we do that? Is that up to me to decide, or is it?
Yes, up to you to decide.
Really?
Yes, thank you.
Okay,
Ajahn.
so, all right. So what kind of aspiration do you want to make? Okay, so there's only one aspiration to make, right? And that aspiration is to live the next year. We're going to try our very best to live a life of kindness. Because it is kindness that is the foundation for everything on the Buddhist path. So that is what I think is the correct aspiration. And really important to get that idea of kindness deeply embedded in your mind. It's a very powerful seed. So when you are in your daily life, and it's very easy to forget about it, because it is deeply embedded, you will be reminded of the idea of kindness. So let's make that aspiration. I will make it too, because it's everyone makes mistakes, right? I hope I haven't offended you while you've been here, but I probably have, because that's the nature of talking too much. So let's just make an aspiration together. So for the next year, you're starting with VESAK. Today is this beautiful day, or the day before VESAK Eve, of remembering the Buddha who showed us the way to ultimate happiness. What a wonderful thing that is. And to honor our teacher, we make this aspiration today to practice his teaching in the right way, especially to practice kindness by body, speech and mind to the best of our ability. So that is the aspiration for tonight. So there you are.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Okay. Wonderful. So,
thank you, Ajahn.
Short.
Can we have a short blessing?
Short blessing. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Ready. Nati me saranang anyang, Buddho me saranang varang, ete nasachavaje. Nasoti te hotu sambada, nati me saranang anyang, Dhammo me saranang varang, 𝑒𝑡𝑒𝑛𝑔 nasote te hotu sambada nati me saranang anyang sango me saranang varang 𝑒𝑡𝑒𝑛𝑔 nasote te hotu sambada.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Wonderful.
Thank you, Ajahn, and thank you everyone for coming. Ajahn has had a long day today from 9 to 9.
It's good, huh?
Yeah.
So, shall we do the sharing of merit as well today?
Share merits.
VESAK Eve, it's nice to share the merits, so we can do that everyone together. So let's, so here we go. Edang menyati nang hotu sukita hontu nyatayo. Edang menyati nang hotu sukita hontu nyatayo. Edang menyati nang hotu sukita hontu nyatayo. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Being good Ajahn Brahm disciples. So.
Let's do the Arahang.
Let's do the Arahang Sama Sambuddha together. Okay. Arahang Sama Sambuddha Bhagava Buddhang Bhagavantang Abhivademi. Svakato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami. Supatipano Bhagavato Sāvaka Sangho Sanghang Namami.
Okay, let's pay respects to Ajahn. Thank you, Ajahn, for a full day of Dhamma. Brothers and sisters, tomorrow we have VESAK celebrations at Choi Hui Ling Club, 2nd floor. So do turn up. You don't need to register if you have not done so. 8:45 guests to be seated, and then we have the speeches from the minister and Brother Pang Hong, and the Dhamma talk by Ajahn Brahmali, followed by live performances, offering of requisites to the Sangha, and sharing of merits and blessings. So we hope to see you there on site. You can purchase the requisites on site. And Monday we have the last talk by Ajahn Brahmali on obscure suttas, something like that. Evening. At BF West. Tomorrow, Choi Hui Ling, Monday night at BF West. Thank you. Good night. Happy VESAK, everyone.